A group of important neurological disorders known as cerebral palsy are frequently encountered in clinical pediatrics and will be discussed in detail in this lecture. The term cerebral palsy is a non-specific term. It is used to describe a chronic, static impairment of muscle tone, strength, coordination, or movements. The term implies that the condition is non-progressive and originated from some type of cerebral insult or injury to the baby before birth, during delivery, or in the perinatal period. Other neurological defects such as blindness, deafness, or epilepsy often coexist with this condition, but these are not a part of the definition of cerebral palsy. It is the most common motor disability of childhood. The prevalence estimation ranges from 1.5 to more than 4 per 1,000 live births. Cerebral palsy is a permanent but unchanging condition that leads to a lifelong physical disability due to damage to the developing brain. In most of the cases, the brain injury occurred during pregnancy. The disorder is evident in the first 12 to 18 months of life. The fundamental cause, severity, precise manifestations, and the prognosis vary widely. The term non-progressive, which is included in the definition of cerebral palsy, means that the lesion does not produce ongoing degeneration of the brain. It also suggests that the brain lesion is the result of a one-time insult to the brain and will not occur again. Whatever the brain damage that occurred at the time of injury is the extent of damage for the rest of the child's life. The most common forms of cerebral palsy, in 75% of the cases, involves spasticity of the limbs. Depending upon the type and severity of the motor deficits, associated neurological deficits or disorders may coexist. Seizures occur in up to 50% of the cases. There is mild mental retardation in 26% of the cases and severe mental retardation in up to 27%. Disorders of language, speech, vision, hearing, and sensory perception are found in varying degrees and combinations. The findings on physical examination are variable. Microcephaly is frequently present. Cataracts, retinopathy, and congenital heart defects may be indicative of congenital infections such as cytomegalovirus and rubella. The motor deficits can range from weakness in one hand to an almost complete lack of voluntary movement. In about 40% of the people, hemiplegia is present. There is no known cure for the disease. Some important underlying causes for this condition are disruption of the blood and hence the oxygen supply to the developing brain of the baby, the intrauterine asphyxia, disruption of the oxygen supply during birth or birth asphyxia, a coagulopathy or septicemia that compromises the blood supply to the developing fetal brain either during pregnancy or shortly after birth, infections among the mothers which also affect the developing fetus during gestation. Infection of the placental membranes, chorioamnionitis, has been associated with an increased risk of cerebral palsy in full-term babies. This accounts for 12% of the spastic CP among children who are born full-term and 28% of CP among children born prematurely. Maternal genitourinary tract infection has also been associated with an increased risk of cerebral palsy, especially among the premature and the low birth weight children. Risk factors. There may be a history of infection of the mother with German measles, that is rubella, or other viral diseases in early pregnancy. Bacterial infections of the mother, fetus, or the infant directly or indirectly attack the infant's central nervous system. Birth anoxia before or during birth. Severe jaundice after birth. The children at increased risk of cerebral palsy are those who are born prematurely or with a low birth weight. The prevalence of cerebral palsy was 6.2 per 1,000 live births among children born with a birth weight between 1.5 kg to 2.5 kg. This increased to 59.5 per 1,000 live births among the children born with a very low birth weight, that is below 1.5 kg. The prevalence decreased to 1.1 per 1,000 live births for children with a birth weight of 2.5 kg or above that. Among those who were born prematurely, the prevalence of cerebral palsy ranged from 35 to 79.5 per 1,000 live births for children born at 28 to 31 weeks of gestation. This decreased to 1.1 to 1.7 per 1,000 live births for the children who were born at 37 weeks or more of gestation. Another risk factor for cerebral palsy is twin pregnancy or multiple gestation. In one study, it was found that twins are almost 5 times more likely to have cerebral palsy than children who are born as single. This may also be due to the fact that children who are born as twins are more likely to be born prematurely or have a low birth weight. Children born as a result of in vitro fertilization, that is assisted conception, are 1.6 times more likely to have cerebral palsy as others because of the fact that these children are more likely to be born prematurely. Cerebral palsy is classified according to the main type of movement disorder which is present. Depending upon the area of the brain which is affected, one or more of the following movement disorders may be present: spasticity, presenting as stiff muscles; dyskinesia, presenting as uncontrollable movements; and ataxia, presenting as poor balance and coordination. Cerebral palsy may be classified according to the predominant motor characteristics present as either spastic, hypotonic, athetotic, dystonic, or ataxic. The disorder may also be classified according to the topographical pattern of limb involvement as monoplegia, diplegia, triplegia, hemiplegia, or quadriplegia. The spastic type of cerebral palsy, which is present in 75% of the cases, is the most common type of cerebral palsy. There are stiff, tense, contracted muscles in this type. In athetoid type of cerebral palsy, there is constant uncontrolled motion of the limbs, the head, and the eyes. In ataxic type, there is a poor sense of balance, often causing falls, and the child stumbles frequently. Rigidity may be the main feature in one type, in which the muscles are tight and resist efforts to make themselves move. Tremors, presenting as uncontrollable shaking and interfering with the coordination of the child, may be present. In this diagram, the predominant areas of the brain affected in different types of cerebral palsy are shown. Spastic type of cerebral palsy presenting with muscular stiffness is due to damage to the motor cortex. The dyskinetic type with unspecialized involuntary movements of the muscle is due to damage to the basal ganglia. The ataxic type with shaky movements is due to cerebellar damage. A variety of terms denote the specific limb or a combination of the limbs affected, as shown in this diagram. Monoplegia affects one limb, usually an arm. Hemiplegia means arm and leg on the same side of the body, but arm is affected more than the leg. The trunk is also involved. Diplegia affects either both arms or both legs. Quadriplegia means all 4 limbs are affected equally and the trunk and the face are also involved. Paraplegia means both legs are affected but the arms are unaffected. Other clinical presentations are muscle spasms or the muscles feel stiff, poor muscle control, reflexes, and posture may be abnormal. Developmental delay, late achievement of the milestones, feeding difficulties, swallowing difficulties, and dysphagia are a common association with this condition. The child may prefer to use only one side of their body. The clinical presentation of cerebral palsy varies according to the area of the brain affected. In this slide, a floppy baby is shown. A hypotonic baby will be unable to hold up his or her own head while lying prone or in a supported sitting position. In toddlers, difficulties may be experienced in the achievement of the milestones of development. This developmental delay may manifest itself as a delay in walking. The child may not be able to walk independently by 12 to 18 months of age, which is considered the normal age of walking for children. Speech delay. The child may not be able to complete or use simple sentences by 24 months of age. Spastic type of cerebral palsy is described by which parts of the body are affected. In spastic diplegia or diaparesis, stiffness is mainly in the legs. The arms are either less affected or not affected at all. These children have difficulty in walking. The legs are pulled together, inwards, and cross each other at the knee. This is known as scissoring. Spastic hemiplegia or hemiparesis affects only one side of the body. The arm is more affected than the leg. Spastic quadriplegia is the severest form and affects all the four limbs, the face, and the trunk. These children cannot walk and have severe developmental disabilities such as intellectual disabilities, associated seizures, vision, hearing, and speech problems are present. In this diagram, the spastic diplegic type of cerebral palsy is shown. As can be seen, the legs are crossed at the knees like scissors. The dyskinetic form of cerebral palsy includes athetoid, chorioathetoid, and dystonic cerebral palsies. These children have difficulty in controlling the movements of their hands, arms, feet, and legs, and makes it difficult for them to sit or walk. The movements are uncontrollable, slow or writhing type, or may be rapid and jerky. Muscle tone changes between lax and tense. There is associated dysphagia, there is difficulty in swallowing, and drooling may be present. Children with ataxic form of cerebral palsy have problems with balance and coordination. These children are unsteady when they walk. Some children have a mixed form of cerebral palsy in which symptoms and signs of more than one type of CP is seen. The most common type of mixed cerebral palsy is spastic dyskinetic cerebral palsy. In this slide, the characteristic features of ataxic form of cerebral palsy are shown. There is poor balance and lack of coordination. As can be seen from the child which is shown, there is wide-based gait. Depth perception is usually effective. These children have a tendency to fall and stumble when they try to walk, so there is an inability to walk in a straight line. This is the least common form of cerebral palsy, affecting only 5 to 10% of the children. In this slide, photos of various posture abnormalities in the different type of cerebral palsy are shown to highlight the differences between them. Some short and long-term complications associated with cerebral palsy are seizure disorder. Seizures are an important cause of recurrent admissions in cerebral palsy patients. Because prolonged uncontrolled seizures can lead to further brain damage, so meticulous control of seizures is extremely important in these patients. Contractures. A contracture is the shortening of muscle tissue due to severe tightening of the muscle as a result of spasticity. The contractures can inhibit bone growth, causes bones to bend, limit the movement, and result in permanent joint deformities that have to be corrected by surgical procedures. They may also lead to dislocation or partial dislocation at the joints. Dysphagia and feeding problems can make it difficult for the cerebral palsy children to be fed. That is why most of these children are malnourished. This causes impaired growth and weaker bones. The child may frequently need a feeding tube for adequate nutrition. Lung disease is another important cause of recurrent admissions in children with cerebral palsy. Because these patients are mostly lying in the bed supine and have postural problems, so there are repeated aspirations and can lead to respiratory difficulty and the need for repeated admissions. Limitation of movement and undernourishment can lead to osteoporosis, and pressure upon the joints due to abnormal alignment of joints can cause joint damage and early osteoarthritis. The following slide will show an MRI of brain of a 1-year-old CP boy who was born prematurely at 27 weeks of gestation. Upon clinical examination, the type of cerebral palsy was spastic diplegic. Findings on the MRI brain are consistent with periventricular leukomalacia. As mentioned before, because there is no cure for this disease, management is mainly supportive. The complications are treated as they arise symptomatically. Anticonvulsants are added to treat seizures. Injections of botulinum can be given to relax the muscles, or muscle relaxants may be given. Contractures may require surgical intervention. Adequate calories and dietary care is important, as is positioning, physiotherapy, and care of the respiratory tract. Because seizure disorder and epilepsy can be a complication in both intracranial brain infections and in cerebral palsy, we will discuss this condition in some detail. Epilepsy is defined as a neurological disorder marked by sudden recurrent episodes of seizures. A seizure is a sudden transient disturbance of brain function manifested by involuntary motor, sensory, autonomic or psychic phenomena, either alone or in any combination. These are often accompanied by alteration or loss of consciousness. A seizure with a predominant motor manifestation is known as a convulsion. It should be clear that seizure is an acute manifestation, whereas epilepsy is a chronic disease which presents with recurrent seizures. Some abnormalities and conditions that put a child at risk for developing epilepsy are degenerative brain disorders. Also included in these are the neurocutaneous syndromes such as tuberous sclerosis and neurofibromatosis, inborn errors of metabolism such as phenylketonuria. Epilepsy tends to run in families. There may be a past history of a head injury or brain infection, use of certain medications, CVA, or brain tumors. There is an association between a child developing epilepsy if there is a history of complex febrile seizures. The International League Against Epilepsy has established classifications of seizures and epilepsy syndromes. These classifications were revised in 2010. Epilepsy is idiopathic if it develops in an otherwise normal child. It is symptomatic if it occurs in the setting of a known or suspected abnormality of the central nervous system. For example, a child with developmental delay or a patient with sclerosis of the hippocampus has symptomatic epilepsy if they develop recurrent seizures. The epilepsies are further subdivided into generalized if the seizures arise from both hemispheres of the brain simultaneously, and partial or focal if the seizure begins in one part of the brain and then becomes secondarily generalized. The diagram in this slide represents the electrical activity in a normal healthy human brain and shows the electrical activity or the electrical impulses of the neurons. They pass in alternate and controlled firing patterns, sending signals throughout the brain. In contrast to the normal pattern, during an epileptic seizure, the neurons are firing electrical impulses simultaneously. For a child to be labeled as having epilepsy, he or she must have experienced seizures on more than one occasions, which are more than 1 day apart, are not associated with fever or hypocalcemia, that is, the seizures should be unprovocative. There are certain areas of the brain which are more likely than others to be the focus of a seizure. These are the motor cortex, that is responsible for the initiation of the body movements, and the temporal lobes, especially the hippocampal area, which are found deeper in the brain. This slide gives the classification of seizure types basic version as given by the International League Against Epilepsy in 2017. Seizures may be of focal onset with or without impaired awareness. These may have motor onset or non-motor onset. These may be focal or secondarily generalized tonic-clonic seizures. Seizures may be generalized onset with primarily motor manifestations being tonic-clonic or non-motor, that is absence seizures. Seizures are known as having unknown onset if the focus is not known. Again, these may be tonic-clonic or non-motor. This table gives a simple and brief description of the choice of anti-epileptic drugs for the different epilepsy types. For primary generalized tonic-clonic seizures, valproic acid is the drug of choice. For partial or secondarily generalized tonic-clonic seizures, carbamazepine is the first-line drug. This can be given in combination with lamotrigine. Valproic acid may also be given. For absence seizures, the first-line drugs are valproic acid and lamotrigine. For myoclonic epilepsy, sodium valproate is the drug of choice. An important condition in children which also lead to recurrent seizures and is included in the differential diagnosis of pediatric epilepsy is febrile seizures. A febrile seizure is defined as a seizure accompanied by a fever of more than 38 degrees without CNS infection of defined cause in infants and children between the ages of 3 months to 6 years of age. The definition does not include seizures occurring during fever in a child who has a past history of afebrile seizures or an underlying brain disorder. Febrile seizures are the most common cause of childhood convulsion disorder. Between 2% to 5% of neurologically healthy infants and children will experience at least one, usually simple febrile seizure. Febrile seizures are twice as common in boys than girls. The main factor which triggers the seizures in febrile seizure is the rapid rise in body temperature. Febrile illnesses which usually cause febrile seizures in children are the infections of the upper respiratory or the GI tract. These may be bacterial or viral infections. Depending upon the clinical presentation, the febrile seizures are classified into two main types: simple febrile convulsions and complex febrile convulsions. In simple febrile seizures, the convulsion lasts less than 15 minutes, whereas in complex febrile seizures, the duration is more than 15 minutes. For simple febrile seizures, there is no recurrence in 24 hours. Multiple seizures may occur in complex febrile seizures. Simple febrile seizures are generalized tonic-clonic in nature and there are no focal features present. A complex febrile convulsion may be focal with or without secondary generalization. In simple febrile seizures, there is no post-ictal pathology or residual weakness. Todd's paralysis, which is a transient condition, may be present in complex febrile seizures. Risk factors for developing future unprovoked seizures or epilepsy after a febrile seizure are: if the age of the child is older than 3 years at the time of the first febrile seizure, if the type of febrile seizures is complex, if there is a family history of epilepsy, if the duration of fever of less than 1 hour was present before the onset of seizures, if there is an underlying neurodevelopmental abnormality. Although children who have history of febrile seizures do have an increased risk of developing epilepsy later on, however, the risk is quite small. In simple febrile seizures, there is a 1 in 50 chances of developing epilepsy in later life. In case of complex febrile seizures, there is a 1 in 20 chance of developing epilepsy later in life.